Gen Z gets called rude constantly, blunt, dismissive, cold. Older generations watch them interact with bosses, with strangers, with service workers, and something tightens in their chest. There's a head shake, a quiet judgment, and then the conversation moves on without ever asking the obvious question. Why are they like this? What actually built this behavior? Nobody seems to want to dig that far. Meanwhile, every other generation gets a reconsideration moment, a documentary, a wave of cultural sympathy. Boomers get nostalgia specials, millennials get think pieces about avocado toast and student debt, Gen Z gets hot takes and LinkedIn posts about how they can't handle a phone call. The analysis stays shallow. The verdict gets handed down fast, and nobody, not once, stops to ask what this generation actually lived through before forming an opinion about how they turned out. And here's what nobody tells you: Gen Z isn't rude. They're the first generation in decades that stopped performing emotions they don't actually feel. Picture this: it's 2008. You're 6 years old. The house feels different. Your parents are stressed in a way that doesn't have a name yet. The news is loud and confusing and everywhere. And somewhere in the background, your brain is quietly logging its first major lesson. Institutions fail. Adults in charge made enormous decisions that destroyed ordinary people's lives, and almost no one faced real consequences. A study published in the Journal of Developmental Psychology in 2019 found that children who experience economic instability before age 10 showed significantly elevated distrust toward authority structures by adolescents, affecting nearly 61% of participants born between 1997 and 2002. That's not a footnote. That's a generation's operating system being written in real time. Parents said, everything's fine when it wasn't. School said you're safe while running active shooter drills twice a semester. Platforms said your data is private. None of it held up. So they stopped taking social signals at face value and started watching behavior instead. Psychologists might call it adaptive skepticism. They just call it paying attention. And it shows up today in every single interaction. Direct, unfiltered, no decorative warmth added on top. When a Gen Z employee doesn't laugh at their manager's bad joke, they're not being disrespectful. They're just not lying about finding it funny. Here's the behavior that confuses people most. Gen Z doesn't do small talk. Not the reflexive, obligatory kind. They'll ignore a phone call, but send a thoughtful voice note at midnight. They'll say almost nothing at a dinner party and then write you a paragraph in a DM that genuinely moves you. People read this as social dysfunction. It isn't. It's selection. They grew up in the most publicly performed social environment in human history. Every online interaction had an audience. Every moment was potentially permanent. Every wrong word could be screenshotted and circulated before you'd finish typing it. So they became precise about when they show warmth, saving it for what feels real instead of spreading it thin across every interaction just to make strangers comfortable. That's not coldness, that's conservation. And once you understand the environment that built it, it makes complete sense. But here's what's fascinating. The same generation everyone calls emotionally shut down is actually the most emotionally literate generation ever documented. They have vocabulary for internal experience that previous generations simply didn't possess. Attachment styles, nervous system dysregulation, emotional flashbacks, hypervigilance. They use these terms the way earlier generations talked about the weather. Casually, precisely, without drama. They're simultaneously the most emotionally fluent and the most emotionally boundaried, capable of going remarkably deep with the right person and completely unavailable to the wrong one. And this started young. The internet was always there when people weren't. So they built internal resources early. Out of sheer necessity, they learned to regulate alone before most kids learned to ride a bike. That's not weakness dressed up as insight. That's just what survival looked like for this particular generation. Their relationship with authority follows its own clear, consistent logic. Gen Z doesn't respect titles. They respect demonstrated competence, full stop. They watch the 2008 financial collapse unfold with zero real accountability. They watched institutional pandemic responses stumble catastrophically in real time. They watched corporate social responsibility campaigns run in the same press release as mass layoffs. Authority abused its credibility so many times that the credential itself stopped meaning anything to them. They'll follow someone who clearly knows what they're doing. They'll completely ignore someone who pulls rank without substance behind it. This isn't insubordination, it's calibration. They're not anti-institution, they're post-deference. And collapsing those two things into one is how most conversations about Gen Z go wrong before they even get started. The second psychological pattern looks, from the outside, like commitment issues or emotional unavailability. In plain language, they leave before they get left, they detach before the institution fails them, they quit the job before the company restructures them out. It looks like flakiness. It reads like a character flaw, but it's a completely logical, adaptive response to having watched every major system they trusted, schools, platforms, governments, employers, eventually let people down. This bleeds most visibly into careers. They don't chase company loyalty, they chase portable skill sets because they learned early that the floor can vanish without warning. And that's not pessimism, that's pattern recognition. They watch older generations exhaust themselves projecting enthusiasm for jobs they hate, sitting through meetings that solve nothing, performing loyalty to companies that had already quietly decided their headcount. And they wonder, genuinely, not sarcastically, why. They didn't get the version of the world where that performance was rewarded. They showed up after the deal had already expired. So they offered something different instead. Complete honesty about what they're actually willing to give and what they're not. No performance, no pretending. Just the truth, handed over plainly. Most people weren't ready to receive it. And that gap between what was expected and what was offered gets misread as disrespect almost every single time. But disrespect and honesty are not the same thing. They never were. Gen Z is a load-bearing wall, not the decorative kind, the structural kind, the one that never gets photographed but holds everything up quietly without acknowledgement. Because between the financial crisis, the pandemic, the algorithmic adolescence, and the relentless noise of growing up entirely online, they absorbed something real. They figured out which rules actually matter and which ones are pure theater. And they quietly, without announcement or applause, refuse to perform the ones that don't. They don't want recognition for that. Most wouldn't even frame it that way. That refusal to seek validation while doing real, honest, sometimes genuinely hard work might be the single most defining thing about them. Sit with that for a moment. If this shifted how you see someone in your life, that's exactly what this channel exists for. Subscribe if you want more. We go deep on generations, psychology, and the invisible forces that shape how people turn out. If you want to support the work, the link is below. No pressure at all. Just genuinely glad you watched.